A2IM, the collective voice of independent music.
Thank you very much for having me with you today. It's wonderful to be with you. I would like to talk with you about climate change and about saving civilization and about hope. So climate change is the biggest issue we face and that we've ever faced. We genuinely need to save civilization. Here's how the great David Gilmour described what it will look like once we achieve that. He said, we need to stop climate change so that we can have a world in which guitars can be played and songs can be sung. That, for me, is a beautiful image of what we need to keep and what we need to save. And I have great hope that we can do it. So let me share with you some of the reasons I have for hope and some of the wonderful activity that musicians have undertaken with us, and then encourage you to think how you too can contribute to stopping climate change and thereby generating hope for yourselves. So I'm James Thornton. I'm a lawyer at an organization called ClientEarth that I founded in London about 13 years ago. We've grown now so that we have offices in London, Brussels, Berlin, Warsaw, Beijing, 5 countries in Africa. We have lawyers working, and we're about to open in Los Angeles. We have almost 200 lawyers and legal professionals. And what we all do is use the tremendous power of the law to address climate change and the other great related issues, loss of nature, pollution, plastics, and so on. Now, how did I wind up doing this work? I, as a child, fell in love with nature, like almost every child. I fell deeply in love with nature, and I thought I was going to be a scientist. No one, certainly I didn't want to become a lawyer. I don't know if anyone ever does. But by the time I got to university, I realized that the environmental crisis had begun and that I could study for the rest of my life the living world which I loved and watch it go down the tubes. Or I could do something about it. And I didn't know what I could do with law, but I thought it would be a very powerful way to address these issues. And indeed it is. There's no more powerful way. So at ClientEarth, in recent years, we've been able to help stop air pollution all across Europe. We've stopped, for the last 13 years, we've stopped any new coal-fired power station from being built anywhere in Europe. And burning coal is enemy number one when it comes to climate change. We've worked in Beijing now. We opened an office in Beijing, and we have helped the Chinese to bring about an enormous change in how they address the environment. They're really going for the environment. They're really trying to clean it up. And I'll come back to that. And many other things. Now, the remarkable thing about this is that we are lawyers who really do work for the earth. So you're our clients. Why do we call it ClientEarth? It's because the earth and everyone who lives upon her, including all of you, are our clients. Usually you think of a lawyer as somebody who would help you with a contract problem or to buy a house. But we consult scientists and believe that the earth speaks to us through science. That's how we consult our client, the earth. We listen to the science and say, what's the science telling us about what needs to be done to save nature, to stop climate change? And then we imagine how we use the powerful tools of law to do that. We're working now in 50 countries, and this would work in every country in the world. So how did we start? Well, in London, we had only 2 or 3 people at the beginning, and I thought we need to show that citizens using the law can solve some enormous environmental problem. I didn't know which one. And the reason for that is governments all over the world are failing to do enough. You all know that. Governments aren't doing enough. So what can citizens do empowering themselves to address climate change and these other issues? I thought let us start by bringing a case that will use the courts to address one of the biggest problems in Europe, which turns out to be air pollution. You might think air pollution in London is much better than in New York or Los Angeles, but not so. Europe has had a great air pollution problem because Europeans fell in love with diesels. Bad love affair. So we brought a case against the UK government, and it was in its own court system. I wrote to the government and said, you have to comply with the clean air laws by 2010. Please tell us that you're going to do so, or we'll have to sue you. They wrote back and they said, we have no intention whatever of complying with these laws until 15 years from now. That's a long time when 40,000 people a year in the UK were dying early every year of air pollution. And we think of coronavirus now, and it's a scourge around the world. But air pollution, other environmental pollution, climate change will turn out to be a much greater scourge unless we deal with it appropriately. So there we were in court, in the Supreme Court of the UK, and we said they're not complying. The government needs to comply with the law. Government stood up and said to the Supreme Court, we have no intention of complying with the law for another 10 or 15 years because it's not convenient. And the Supreme Court turned to us and said, well, they say it's not convenient. What do you expect us to do? We're only the Supreme Court. Marvelous question. So we said, forget that this is an environmental case. It could be a case about family law or military law. It doesn't matter. If the government can come in and say to the Supreme Court of a country, we're only going to comply with the law when it's convenient for us, then you're not living in a democracy under the rule of law. You're living by fiat and diktat, by whatever the government feels like doing that day or that week or that month. And once we put it that way, the Supreme Court gave us the victory and ordered the government to clean up, which it is now doing, if too slowly, but it is cleaning up. Then we immediately went to Germany, the heart of the motor industry. You all know Mercedes and Volkswagen and Porsche and so on. And these diesel vehicles are being produced in Germany, Stuttgart, Dusseldorf, Munich. So we sued in those places, terrible air pollution, and we won in every one of those. And the judges started banning diesel vehicles from coming into the cities. This drove the car companies nuts. And the case went up to the highest court in Germany, where we won. Same day, Chancellor Angela Merkel gets on the TV and says, this case is not nearly as important as it looks like. And when the Chancellor says the case isn't so important, that is much more important than you could have ever dreamed. So that was wonderful. And then quickly, across country after country after country, we started winning these cases. Now, what that meant was that people also stopped buying diesel vehicles. 25% within a year reduction in the sale of diesel vehicles. Wonderful. So here we were showing that citizens can use the law to address a problem, clean up the air, and also drive the market towards electric vehicles. So knowing that, using that, knowing we could do that, we also set out to stop all coal-fired power stations from being built in Europe. And we have succeeded. Since we started, none have been built. Now, the next thing we need to do is to stop coal-fired power stations from being built all across Asia. There are about 400 that are intended to be built across Asia. The people don't want them. People want electricity. They don't want filthy coal. So the idea is to stop the building of these coal-fired power stations by working with local people. Meanwhile, helping renewable, clean energy get built so that people can have a good, clean future. Talking about the future takes me to China. We see all kinds of terrible stories about China in the Western press. Some of them are true. But about the environment, the Chinese have really woken up. I was invited there 7 years ago now to help the Supreme Court of China write a law to allow citizens, Chinese citizens, to sue polluting companies, including those owned by the government. A remarkable thing. Chinese citizens able to sue companies, including those owned by the government. And that was the first joint project. That turned pretty quickly into a deep relationship, working with the Supreme Court and the Ministry of the Environment. And the idea there was to train judges to decide environmental cases. So we've been doing that, and we've trained over 1,000 judges how to decide environmental cases. And then the prosecutors came to us, the Chinese prosecutors, and said, we now have the right to sue the government, the Chinese government, on behalf of the people. But we've never sued the government. You sue governments all the time, all over the world, and you always seem to win. Could you share your techniques with us so that we can sue the Chinese government on behalf of the people? So we've been doing that. And over the last 3 years, these prosecutors, from a standing start, have now brought over 100,000 cases. A remarkable achievement. And they're winning them. They're resolving them. They're cleaning up. Now, in our own work, in the development of ClientEarth, musicians have played an enormous role. Right from the beginning, Brian Eno was our trustee, and he remains one of our trustees, a man of great vision. And he brought, soon after he joined, he brought in his friends Coldplay. Coldplay have been working with us and supporting the efforts of ClientEarth for about 12 years now. And another visionary musician who has been supporting us is David Gilmour. So David and his wife, Polly, decided to sell David's collection of guitars last year, 127 guitars, and auction them at Christie's and give the proceeds of that sale to ClientEarth in order to help us stop climate change. Now, David made a video about the sale, and remarkably, that collection of guitars was sold for $21 million. And they, with enormous generosity, gave the proceeds of that sale to ClientEarth to help us fight these fights on behalf of everyone. A great many young musicians are beginning to join up and support our work. Caribou, Fortet, Rina Sawayama, and many others. And it's very exciting to work with creative people. You know, as far as lawyers go, we're pretty creative. And it's very easy for us to work with creative industries, creative people. And the question for us is always, how can you share the message about how to take care of the earth and people's ability to make a difference? How can you share that message in a way that is heard? How can you share the message that you can be empowered to do something meaningful? Because that's what gives hope. And hope is the most important engine we have in the fight to save civilization. And creative people, particularly the musicians in the music industry, are in an unbelievably important position to be able to do this. Who wants to listen to a lawyer talk to them? But everybody wants to hear from musicians in the music industry. When you speak, people listen. Now, what might you be interested in doing? Well, the music industry has a number of leading players who are extremely interested in becoming carbon neutral, even in the fairly short term. They're looking at how they tour. They're looking at how they make records. This is very exciting because if this happens well, and I am certain that it will provide an astoundingly positive example for people in other industries and for people at home. It will be inspiring. And I look forward to working with as many members of music industries as we can to do this. You know, if we work on these issues together, if we work to protect nature, if we work to stop climate change, there is no doubt that we can have an enormous impact. There is no doubt in my mind that working together, and only if we all work together, can we save civilization. It's a joint effort in which you have an enormously important part to play. Now, remember what David Gilmour said. He said the future is one in which we need to have guitars played and songs sung. That's the future that I want to live in, and that I want future generations to live in. It's a beautiful future, and we can build it together, I'm certain. Thank you very much.